As an online expert, I'm sure the idea of writing a book has crossed your mind. I know it has mine, but there's been this thought of like, it's going to be a huge, daunting task. I will do it one day. It's going to take a lot of time. Maybe I should hire a ghostwriter. All of these thoughts have gone through my head. Well, if that's you, if you have any thought about ever writing a book and you feel like it's this big, overwhelming thing or something's going to take a really long time, this episode is for you. This was probably one of my favorite episodes I've recorded in the past year. The reason why is because I got to ask questions selfishly. We had an expert come on in this episode to talk about how to write a book, how to make it profitable, how to generate sales, how to use it to monetize even course sales, how to build more authority, how to get on best-selling times lists, and how to do it in as little as 6 weeks. If you have any interest in blowing up your brand, becoming more of a thought leader, and writing a powerful book, this episode is for you. So if that's you, well, let's just get into it. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today's episode is going to be a great one. It's an episode that I am selfishly going to be asking questions because the topic of what we're going to talk about is something that I've thought about for many years. Some of my friends are starting to get into it, and I'm really excited for today's guest. I think it's going to reveal a lot. You guys are going to learn a lot, and it's going to be an amazing episode. So today we have Sara Connell from the Thought Leadership Academy, and we are going to talk to you guys about best-selling books and getting more thought leadership status inside your space. So Sara, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. And I've been diving into yourself, getting ready for the podcast a little bit, but even just before today's episode, just hearing about what you've been able to do, what you can do, and how many books you're writing per year just kind of blows my mind a little bit. And I can't wait to get into that topic. For those of you or the audience that doesn't know who you are or exactly what you do you mind telling us a little bit about your story and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm thrilled to be here. And for all of you listening, I'm a big fan of this podcast and Brandon, your work, and tell all my clients they need to study with you for messaging. So we're in total simpatico because, a book is basically a long piece of messaging in a lot of ways, right? Yeah. And so, I live in Chicago right now. And where I'll start is that I really did want to be a writer. I did have that dream as a kid, and I will say 99% of my clients are like, I have no interest. You know what I mean? It's not their calling, because they're entrepreneurs, coaches. They're like, I think a book would help me, but so It's great. That's my passion. That's what I'm here for. But I really got some messages along the way, like some of us do, of like, I'm not good enough, and my English teacher didn't tell me I was special, and my family wasn't like, go be. Someone said like, nothing instills more fear in a parent than a child who says, I want to be an artist or an entrepreneur or something. My parents like, not a good idea, right? So anyway, I kind of get the idea. Like I decide to read other people's work. I'm an English major at college, and then I get recruited to this big ad agency in Chicago. And it's supposed to be this, one of the best places for women to work, and, this big, cool, like fun people, all this stuff. And I got in, unfortunately, right in the middle of the entire Me Too experience that was going on. And it was dreadful, right? Anyone that's, whether it's a relationship or a job, you've been in something really toxic, really rough. And the way that I, dealt with that trauma that I was going through was really got into a lot of disordered eating and just, I was just spiraling. I was a young person supporting myself. I didn't think I had a way out, and I felt trapped. And I'm sure many of your listeners, people have been through this stuff. Right. So it just kept getting, of course, things like that get worse and worse. And I walked into work every day and felt like I was dying. That's really how it felt. And I didn't know what to do. So I'm traveling back from Boston to Chicago, and they're calling my flight, so I didn't have a lot of time. And I see a bookstore, right? And books, again, they were always this sort of oasis, this lifeline. So I ran in the bookstore. I randomly grabbed a book. We all know, probably not random at all. And I read the whole thing. I read it on the flight. I read it in the taxi. I stayed up all night reading, crying. And by the time I finished that book, I knew I was done. I was like, I'm leaving this job. I might live on the street. I don't care. Like, I am not going one more day.
What was the book? Do you remember?
It's called Holy Hunger by Margaret Bullitt Jonas. And the wild thing is, this is an example. She's not, Brene Brown, or, she's not
Right.
Tony Robbins. Like, she's not a household name. She's a woman who shared about some, traumatic experiences she'd gone through. In my case, she was sharing about something relevant, disordered eating and mental health. And she shared what she did to get better. She shared a solution. And I just said at the end, I was like, I'm getting help. I'm going to do it. I'm leaving this job. And I did. I mean, that's the crazy. It was this one book at the right time. And that was it. And everything opened up in my life. Like if you ever had that, I don't know, Brain, if you've had something
Yeah.
where you made that one pivotal move and then like everything you've been wanting, I'm now, the person I was dating is now my husband of 22 years. We got to move to England. So what then happened is I decided, I'm paying this gift forward. Like I probably won't succeed. I'm probably not good enough. All the, I call them the gremlins are
Yeah.
still there, but I am going to go for this writing thing. And just, that we know it's like that commitment, right? When you just go all in on something, and it didn't happen in one day. It was definitely a process, but I was able to, get an agent and a book deal and got on Oprah and all these amazing things, right?
Just those
Happened.
like easy little things.
No big. I mean, but that's the thing. It's like, right. If I'd stayed in like any of us, if we
Right.
stay on this side of fear and we think I'm not good enough, we don't go for it. Like we have no idea. So when the, New York Times happened and Oprah and the stuff, I said, you know what? I had been trained as a coach. I've been working as like a women's empowerment coach and a writer kind of in these two lives. And I just felt really clear that I was called to merge my worlds. And I said, you know what? I'm going to really spend the rest of my life making sure that leaders that have a system, a solution, an idea, methodology, like that they get to that person in the airport who's
Yeah.
spiraling, or they get to the person on Facebook who's just really doesn't know how to get out of where they are, or it just wants to get to their next level. It's not always about,
Yeah.
drama and all that. So, so that's really how I came to do it. And we launched Thought Leader Academy, where we help people, write a book, but then the book is a vehicle. It's not a
Yeah.
bucket list. The book is a vehicle to open doors for speaking and TEDx and building an audience and really, doubling, tripling, or more your revenue.
I love that. So you had this pivotal moment, which, by the way, that is how everything in my life has happened. There's always a moment, and that changes the trajectory of everything. And what I find is like if you don't take that moment, it's just the same stuff just keeps happening over. And sometimes it even just gets worse until
Yes.
you hit a breaking point of like, all right, I need that drastic change. And then so you had that moment, then you wrote your book, and obviously you're helping people write books now. But what was the first book actually about? The one that got you on Oprah
Yeah, it was
and blew it up
crazy.
in the
So
time?
I had this, other wild experience going at the same time. The first book was actually a memoir. We
Okay.
help people write a lot of, thought leader books, business books, leadership books. But
Yeah.
memoir being, it's your story. It's written more like a novel, what happens to be true. Those of us that have read, the Carlos Castaneda books or any of that stuff,
Yeah.
John Juan stuff. And
Don't even
so
get me started on those
I
books. I
know
could
we could
talk
have a whole separate.
all
I'd
day.
love to have
Yeah.
a whole other conversation with the shaman work, because I've done that as well. But
Yeah.
anyway, so the first book was a memoir, and what happened is that after anyway, just to give the really wild nutshell, I had sort of a science fiction in real life experience of my husband and I were trying to start a family. We had a lot of challenges, fertility stuff. We had twins that were stillborn. I mean, just rough.
Yeah.
And my mother, almost 60 years old at the time, had this crazy idea to offer to be our surrogate, if you can imagine. So,
Wow.
like, talk about, and so that's how my son, he's 12 now. My mom is awesome. She's like, it
Wow.
liberated her from like everything in her life. She's having the best years of her life now.
Wow.
And anyway, so the first book was that story. It was really about like, again, the book that helped me was someone sharing, like, here's the journey I took. Here's how
Yeah.
I discovered, and we were able to, all these families, people are like, I'd lost hope. I didn't know there was another way, and they've had so many miracle babies, and everything. So
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't going to become like a fertility coach, right? That wasn't my
Right.
calling. And so then have gone on to write. I'm on my, just finished my fifth book. So the
Wow.
sixth one is in process. And, I'm like a marathon runner who get to the end and I'm like, let's do it again. Other people are like, my sister's a medical doctor and she's like, I never want to do one again. Like, she's like, I
Yeah.
know I just need one and I'm done. So, that's not, everyone does not need to write many books, but,
Right.
yeah, that's what the first one. And it really, it showed me the traditional publishing process, which is very long and really has some, I call it very Jurassic, sort of experience. And so we've been just, what we really do is bring entrepreneurship to publishing. because it's not an industry. Even my agent, who's traditional publishing all the way and got my first book deal, she now like helps out on stuff at in our process, because we just it used to take 4 years, and your publisher keeps 90% of the revenue. There's all this stuff, and so we just were like, that's not our model, and so we're able to help people do books in a few months. Author keeps all the money. Like, it's just better,
Right.
like, in my
Well,
mind.
I heard someone recently, because Mel Abraham is a good friend of mine. He's written a couple books, and some of them have hit some of the best-selling charts
Yeah.
and things like that. And he's in the middle of writing a second one, and he talked to, I forget who it was. Like, I think it was Dean. I can never say his last name, Grauskioski or
Oh,
whatever.
Graziosi, I think.
Yeah,
Dean
yeah, yeah.
Graziosi. Yes, yes,
And
yeah.
he had told Mel, he's like, look, he's like, you probably don't want to go through a publisher because of all the things you just said. And he said, honestly, he's the best thing to do is like to self-publish and blow it up. He's like, if you're great at marketing, he's like, if you do that, and he's like, you blow it up big enough, the publishers come after you. And then now you have like leverage of negotiating and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think the game has changed. And a lot of people don't realize it. Like, a lot of people don't realize that the way to write a book, the way to sell a book, there's so many avenues available to us today that weren't even here 5, 10 years ago.
It is the best time, I feel like, to be a content creator, to be
It
if you
is.
want to be an author of any kind, or you just want a book to do the doors that it opens, and the scaling client attraction. And we
Yeah.
actually did like another move on top of it. We actually created our own traditional publisher, so our clients don't have to say self-publish. Like, we're like able to get them a book deal, and yet they still get all the benefits of the speed, keeping all the money, and getting to get in front. And you can still have Random House can still come to you and say, Brandon, your book's
Love
blowing
that.
up. Holy shit. Like,
Right.
we'd like to do a second run, or whatever. So no
Yeah.
doors are closed. But yeah, that's just because I came through tradition. I was like, I want to take the best of traditional, but give the author the power, bring entrepreneurship to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so beautiful when you look back at the path, because it's like you went through the traditional realm,
Yeah.
which was great because you got to help a lot of people. You got your story out there. It gave you a lot of momentum, but also gave you the experience of seeing like, what does that process look like? Where is it lacking? Can we improve on it? How do we do it
Yes.
better next time? Which is really cool. I mean, I would love to I would love to dive into the process of like, what does it take to write a book?
Yeah.
And then how do we start to sell it, market it, all that stuff? Because you said you're almost writing 2 books a year. Is
This
that
is
right?
this is so shocking. So years ago, I remember feeling, I don't know, we need to make a word. I feel like we need a word of like happy jealous. When you're like happy for someone, but you're also like, oh, and I would see
Yeah.
these people cranking out books, like a book a year, they're just like boom, boom. And I thought, how are they doing that? Like, I don't understand. It takes me forever. And I had this whole story. I'm a slow writer and all
Yeah.
this. And
Which, by the way, is my story. Like,
yes,
I am the
right?
world's slowest writer. It took me an
That's
hour to write a simple email because I'm always
right.
like intentional with every word. So I
Okay.
have that story too.
Exactly. And I'm not available. People say, oh, just write like a crappy book and say you have a book. I'm not, hell no. You're
Right.
world-class book, like excellent. We put out our best work. So I thought, like, what are they doing that I don't understand? And so this is a little, I think I call it, it's not a happy accident, but I was procrastinating from writing, and I reverse engineered, because I didn't want to write. So if anyone
Yeah.
can relate, like, I'm avoiding it at all costs. So I said, I'm going to look at the top like 100 of my favorite New York Times best-selling nonfiction books, leadership, business, personal growth. And I'm going to see, like, I'm going to like reverse engineer these books, and I'm going to figure out what are the moves? Because there's got to be something that all these books are doing, right? And
Yep.
so I call it productive procrastination, because what happened is, as I sat through that delightful procrastination from my own book, I saw like 3 very specific things that virtually all these books did. Now, they all did them differently. It's not a formula like that a reader would recognize. It's all kind of behind
Right.
the curtain. But I said, oh my God, I think these are the 3 things that will make a best-selling book, that really create that relationship with the reader. That, because I'm also about high converting books. We'll get into that second. About like,
Yeah.
how does this book actually, we don't just, if you write like the memoir I wrote, right? I had
Right.
massive visibility and exposure, but I had no business behind it.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, that wasn't ideal for that. Now it taught me all the stuff I needed to do what I do now.
Is
But
the business model usually traditionally like just book sales? Is that usually what
I
people?
mean, and think about that. Amazon's taking a cut, Barnes and Noble's taking, I mean, it's a
Right.
low ticket item. So we
Yeah.
really encourage, that's why we created Thought Leader Academy, because I started just working on people with books.
Right.
And, but then like, where are they making any money? You know what I mean? Like, it's not, and impacting people. It's not just
Right.
the financial, it's both. I'm reverse engineering these books that I say, okay, here are 3 things. And I decided to try it out. And I wrote a book in 6 weeks
That's so
using this
cool.
framework. And I was like, holy, so I thought, is it replicatable? Right. And you talk about this, Brandon, so
Yeah.
much. It's like, do it on yourself, but is it replicatable? Can other people get these results? So I had someone come in to work with us, and she had a course, she had a program. And I said, okay, like, do you want to try to do this? She's like, I want this done fast. I said, do you want to really give it a go in 6 weeks? And she did it. And then another person did it, so some of our clients take 12 weeks, 6 weeks. You can, hell, take as long as you want. But,
Right.
most of us want the book as an asset for the greater impact and income that we're up to.
Right.
So the SSS, I want to share it here. I want you all to have it because
Well, can I say one thing real quick first? I love the process of how you came up with it. The 6 things, or sorry, the 3 things. Most people, I say this all the time, but people are still surprised when I say it, is like, when it comes to messaging, I have no formal education. I've never taken an NLP class. English was my worst subject. My grammar is terrible. To do what I do today is just mind blowing to me. However, the way I learned most of it is I just looked at best selling books, like just like you did, or I looked at like copy or something, and I realized, I became self-aware of it, this whatever they're saying is making me feel this, it's making me feel desire, it's making me feel demand. What are they doing? And then that's how I created most of our messaging frameworks, is I can see, and I just started to notice, oh, Simon Sinek in this book is using this, or he went into this belief and used this pattern here, and then he did this thing over here. And I just started to craft my own methodology, started using it, and then giving to the people, and was it replicatable? And that's basically, like, the way you came up with that is very similar to how I came up with a lot of the messaging stuff that we do. And obviously a lot of it has to do with experience and stuff too. But I mean, I love that. And then also, when we look at people like Alex Hormozy, who like blew up over this past year, for me, my first experience with him was a high converting book. It was a book that led
was it
to,
the was it the because the one that got me of his books was the making offers so good people feel stupid saying no.
yeah, it
Like,
was the $100
yes,
million offers or something like
yes,
that.
that's the one.
Yeah. And then that's book just blew up. And that, I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of what you're talking about. It's like these high
It is.
converting, high impact sort of books
That's
that
exactly right.
just can propel you to
Yeah.
levels above. So I love
I
that.
mean,
Let's
I wouldn't
dive in.
have, and I wouldn't have known his name a year ago, right? Like
I didn't either. Yeah, I didn't either.
I read that book, and then I had my whole mastermind read the book. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
so that's how you become a household name.
Love it. Well, let's dive into the framework.
Let's do it. So it's since my name's Sarah, it'll be hopefully easy to remember. The letters of the framework are SSS. So you really just have to remember one letter 3 times.
Well,
SSS. So the first S is your story. This is your origin story. And I'm sure, Brandon, when you think about messaging, obviously you're great at storytelling. You talk about this with your team. Think about, even if no one's seen the Marvel movies or anything like that, like we know some things about superheroes. So just take Batman, for example, right? Batman is a little kid. His parents are murdered behind the movie theater, and he grows up out of that horrific experience to be a stand for fighting crime in Gotham City, keeping the people safe, right? That's his origin story of his mission, of his, movement, his stand. And every one of you listening, like, you have an origin story to the work you're doing in the world. Like, you have your superhero story. Of some of us, it was through, again, like me, this traumatic experience, that a book saved my life and whatever. Some people it's through, like, they have an insight, they have a revelation, they have a calling, they get a download, if you will, of some like really cool, better way, to make money or to be a better parent or whatever it is, right? But I bet if everyone like hit pause right now and just journaled for 2 minutes, you'd know, like, this, like you said, there's moments, there's mission moments, there's moments when we say, this is like my destiny, this is my calling. So the important part about doing that up front with your reader is twofold. The first is there's rapport, right? Your reader understands that you kind of get them. This is like self-diagnosis. We'll talk about that in the second S. That's actually where your self-diagnosis will come in.
I love
But
it.
readers know, like, you've been where they are. Brandon, if you came on to everyone, I'm like, oh my God, I went to this, special Ivy League school and I learned messaging and, from my dad, you know what I mean? It's a different
Right.
story than if you're like,
Totally.
look, it was trial and error. I'm in the trenches. I was working this out. Like, I had no money. It's exciting, right? It's like
Yeah.
there's comeback moments in our stories. So you want to give that to your readers so they get that you get them, you understand where they are, and you then get to share your credentials, and they don't have to be a PhD, like you said,
Right.
self-taught. It can be you cured yourself of Lyme's disease in a different way than your doctors are telling you, or you had 6 kids that you homeschooled, and like,
Yeah.
God, I can't imagine, but like, I have I have one child, and that's a lot, but you've lived something, and you want to share that with the readers so they trust you. And I always think about, I went whitewater rafting with my family years ago, and it was a disaster. Like, we were like the worst, like, fought the whole time. It was horrible, but it really gave me this great insight, because the guide, before you get out in a raft, if any of you have done skydiving or rafting or some kind of adventure, typically you don't just like saddle up in the gear. They take you into some room and they teach you some technique. And this guy came in, and he was like out of central casting, beautiful rugged face and his flannel jacket. And he's like, I've been on this river since I was 5. I know every turn. I've never had someone get injured. Everyone was like, let's get in the boats. Like, I'll
Yeah.
trust this guy. But if it had been some, guy off Wall Street in like a suit and been like, dude, I don't know, water rafting looks fun, man. Like, you guys want to jump in the boats? Like, no one's getting in those boats.
Yeah.
So this is your moment. Your origin story with your reader is like, you want to be the guide that they'll get in the boat with, whether it's around a business strategy or a relationship thing or nutrition, health, whatever it is. So
Yeah.
that's the first S.
Okay, can I add something to this?
Please.
There's so many beautiful things that line up with like our messaging philosophy with what you're talking about, which is just really awesome. And the one line you even said it too is like it allows you to meet them where they're at. And with messaging, this is what I tell the audience all the time is like you need to know what those specific things are, the pain points, the problems, the mistakes, what are they doing, what are they thinking, what are they feeling? And I would imagine all those can be used into a story. And when you start to tell the story, it makes the audience feel more relatable, but also they come to this automatic conclusion, like you're saying, of like trust, and that rapport is being built. And I think where a lot of people mess up is they try to like force the rapport, force the trust, look at my credentials, look at all this stuff. I'm like, that's not
Yes.
really what builds the trust. It's the experience of, do you understand what I'm going through? Are you validating the emotions? Do you understand the emotions? And do you have the experience to do what we're here to do together?
Yes.
And you can't force that. And so it sounds like a great story kind of encompasses and allows you to gain all of those things, if I'm understanding correctly.
It really does. And it's so, and I was going to say, any of your students are going to, like, you could write a book. So your book will be so awesome because you've thought through these, right? You've got your content for
Right.
these S's. So, and then what you're talking about bridges beautifully into part 2 of the framework. The second S is what I call the situation or
Mm-hmm.
the stakes. So this is where, in a great book, right? If we think about the hero's journey or the shero's journey, right? Which is really like, you all listening as the business owner or the course creator, you're called to your quest. You're sharing your things, you go through your challenges. So your individual story represents the universal. Like, there's a part of the individual within the universal. So in this second part of the framework, we zoom out and talk about the situation at large. And a book that some people have read that I'll use as an example is Profit First. I don't know, Mike
Mm-hmm.
McAllowitz's book, if people have read it, it really helped me because so in the first part of his book, he was one of the ones I reverse engineered. So first part of his book, he tells his stories like, I was an entrepreneur, I'm making tons of money, gross income, I'm bringing none of it home. My marriage is in trouble. I don't see my kids. I'm more stressed and less free than I was working at a corporate. He felt he
Yeah.
was in this trap. He wasn't profitable. So we're feeling it if we're an entrepreneur, which I was reading it, going, yes, I'm
I
feeling it.
think if you're an entrepreneur, you're gonna feel that at some
Oh,
point. Like the
oh,
second you start making real money, I
oh,
think we all go through that because then expenses go
right?
up, spending is a little more frivolous. You're just kind of like, oh,
Team,
and you're like,
marketing.
where the f did all my money go?
It was such a rude awakening. I was like, I made
Yeah,
more than I've ever made, and I kept none of it.
yeah,
I found the book, and I'm going, yes, Mike. But then he zooms out, and in the second chapter, he says, hey, look, I'm not just some loser who can't get it together. This is the state of the world right now. 90 some
Mhm.
percent of entrepreneurs either have debt or they don't keep hardly any, they're not profitable, they're certainly not free. And he really shows, so this is where we get to be a little bit like journalists, and you
Mhm.
can go on AI right now, chat GPT, whatever, and you could get stats in seconds for your topic. It's like, here are the big, studies, statistics. We call them astonishing stats, right? And I
Mhm.
had a realtor I was working with, and she told me how people decide in 9 seconds if they're going to buy a house or a condo.
Wow.
And so I was like, you have to put that right up in the situation, because if you're writing a book to help people sell their home quickly and like cut that time in half, don't worry about what's in your cool gym downstairs or your kids' playroom. Like what are they seeing in the first 9 seconds when they walk in? They got to put all your attention there, because that's where the sale is going to happen. And so everybody has this in our industries. We have these statistics, facts, and you put that up there, and you show the reader, this is where your pain points come in. What is it going to cost them if they keep doing what they're doing?
Yeah.
What are the stakes? I call those, just to keep it in all the S's, the situation, the stakes. So you zoom out, you say, hey, you're not alone. This is the deal. I'm sure, Brandon, with you, it's like some percent, which is probably most, entrepreneurs like don't know how to do messaging, and they're leaving money on the table. They're struggling when they don't need to. If they just come learn messaging, like everything could change. And so you give them those stats, you tell some, little bit of storytelling there, and you show them the stakes. Look, where are you going to be in a year if you don't fix your messaging? Where are you going to be in 5 years? Probably right where you are if you don't do it differently, right? And you guys all in your community, brand, with like, where do you take this from your sales calls? You take this material, as any of us who have a business already, you got it. And so that's the second S. And this is where I love embedding. This is what makes a book high converting instead of just interesting read. We want to move readers at this point from passive reader to an active relationship with us. We want to move them to a lead.
Okay.
And a great way
to
do that.
The difference between passive and active reading?
So someone might read a book, maybe this has happened for you, Brandon, too, or anyone watching, and you read a book and you're like, oh, that was so cool. Right? But there's no necessarily like action that you're going to take, or maybe you'll implement something in the book, but you're not in a relationship with that author. Yeah. So what we want to do is provide a really exciting interactive experience at this point in the book. That's like, it could be a quiz, an assessment, a template. Like Mike Michalowicz would say, I call it the how screwed are you like invitation. He's like, he gives you the questions in the book to analyze your own situation. He's like, or click here, or go to this website, fill out. Now we know we are going to get emails from Mike. We're going to get probably outreach from Mike's team. Look, we get it, but I don't care, because I want his customized report of how screwed I am on my profitability and my action step of like what to do next. Right. So quizzes, assessments, this can be a calculator, a template. You had Terrell on, the other, a different, recently, like he gave a calculator, your freebie.
Yeah.
It just needs to be something that's going to have someone. We just embed QR codes in the book.
Okay.
Doing it. So you just literally say, hey, look, I can give you the answers, but if you want like your customized report, just scan here. I mean, the conversion rates have gone up so much for our books. It's just so great.
Genius. I remember, I think the first book that I ever read that was like this was Jeff Walker's book around like video series or something like that, or launching like a 3-part launch series. And I mean, this was like 8 years ago. And then that's what he did, was all these links and go here. Yeah. But then I remember, I vividly remember, it was in my in-laws house, like when we were broke, and I was trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Why isn't anything working? I remember sitting on the floor reading his book, and then he had his first call to action with a link. And I remember sitting there going, I'm too tired to get up right now and go type this into the computer. So I didn't do it.
But if someone can scan here.
Yeah. Had there been a QR code, I would have done that. And I may have gone later, but I actually remember that thought going, I'm too tired to get up and go do it. I had like a newborn. I was tired. I was just like so done. So I love the QR code. That's awesome.
It's such a gift to us now with writers, because people, again, like you said, I'm like, if I don't have an Alexa command, I don't want to turn on my TV remote myself, like I just talk to this bot and have it do, it's so crazy. So you give something, and it's all embedded. Any of these interactive resources in the book are all there to serve the reader. It's not a infomercial. It's not a buy my stuff. We're not at that point yet, but we're like, hey, I could give you an assessment and give you a next step, or I can give you a calculator to make this easier for you. And people do it because, like you said, you're like, I do want that resource, or workbooks are great. I'll just create a PDF workbook and say, hey, you can do all the exercises in this book in a workbook. Click, it's completely free. Go here. You'll see a lot of Dan Sullivan, Ben Hardy, and they'll do that in their books. Okay. So that's
one more question for you. Yeah. I'm just kind of like trying to think of some objections or questions that the audience would have. And one thing that popped in my head, let's see if you can
Yeah.
dismantle this, which is like if someone's intention is to get onto like the New York Times best-selling list or like Wall Street's list or I don't know, whatever, can books like this with very direct, distinct call to actions where people can look at it and go, this is a marketing piece. Can those books still hit best-selling charts?
Yeah, they sure can. I mean, you'll see all of these in Tony Robbins has been on the New York Times with his books that had the QR codes.
Right. Yep.
Like again, I know Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy. I know them a little bit, and they're going for it with the new 10x is easier than 2x book. They're going for New York Times. The New York getting on New York Times is that's the Oscars of the
Right.
book world, right? It's really about marketing. It
Yeah.
comes down because it's just numbers, but you also have to know where we actually we actually had a team from the University of Chicago like reverse engineer and crack the code on all the best like what do you need to get on each of the lists like exactly so that whoever wants to build those funnels authentically, not in any like weird in just like what does it take?
Yeah.
Because Amazon bestseller list is different than Wall Street Journal, is different than New York Times.
Right.
But yes, you can 100% right now. The key is though, what you don't do is essentially make a pamphlet. You know what I mean? You can't just
Yeah.
you need to write a real book with
Yeah.
this SSS or some kind of structure, give real value, tell stories. You've got to create an actual book. They're not going to
Right.
get something that's 20 pages long. That's just a marketing device, but can
Right.
this become a great lead magnet market? Hell yeah, that's why these people write these books,
Yeah, and I think too a lot of people I don't think a lot of people really understand that anyone who's on that any one of those lists, they did marketing behind the book, and that's kind of why you go with a publisher because they understand the marketing and really what it comes down to. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I do have a limited sort of knowledge on this, but I think it just comes down to sales, right? Like who made the most amount of sales of the book in a certain week or whatever it may
Correct.
be. Yeah, and so it's like if you're just a great marketer, and again, it's one of those things that like in order to sell something, it has to be a good product. So as long as the book is very helpful and information packed and has those resources, then it could definitely hit those charts. I remember Mel when he wrote his first book, he said it almost cost them like $250,000 in marketing just to get onto that list. And that was like more of the traditional route, but
New
yeah,
York Times is like that's the level of investment you're going to make. Now, Amazon, we get all like so far, and I told my clients you all have to finish because so far all of our clients have finished, published, and hit bestseller on Amazon a week of their
love
launch.
it.
So it's like I'm
Love it.
committed to because then the rest of your life, when you're pitching podcasts or conferences, if you want to get paid for keynotes, you say best-selling author Brandon Lister.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you have that
Yep.
credential forever. And yes, do some people distinguish between the lists? And sure, and your
Right.
royalty checks, if you're making,
Yep.
that. But New York Times is an enormous marketing investment.
Yeah.
But I've hit USA Today, Wall Street Journal, Amazon, like those lists are more accessible for
Yeah.
people that don't have like a massive, marketing budget or anything like that. So
Yeah, or just a giant following too, like the Rachel
yes,
Hollises of the world. If you're not in that
exactly.
level, so that makes sense. Okay, cool. I think we left off. So we had story, we had situation,
Yeah, ready for three.
and yeah, let's do it.
So the third S is the rest of your entire book, right? So it could be chapter 1 is your story, chapter 2 is the situation stakes with this interactive experience. The rest of your book is the solution. Which makes sense. So can you imagine you're like, here's my story and here's how screwed you are, like
Yeah.
in the second one. And then it's like, okay, see ya. That would be
Yeah.
a second book. But,
Yeah.
what makes a best-selling book is the same thing that makes a best-selling launch, an email. It's that you help people solve a problem or achieve a dream. And
Okay.
it could be a piece of those, right? Sometimes people get scared. They hear me say, I'm teaching a master class and they're like, oh my God, you have to solve their whole marriage or their whole nutrition. It's like, no. Imagine if someone gives you think about Atomic Habits by James Clear. Maybe a lot of us have heard of that book. It's like, he's not solving everything in your life, but he's giving you a cool framework for habit change. Right. And so, it's huge. I mean, that was a New York Times bestseller, and a really, really great book. And it wasn't like everything, but so your solution could be, let's say you have a course and there's 6 pillars of your course. There's your 6 chapters.
Yeah.
If you have a 12-week coaching program, there's your 12 chapters. If you have a podcast, your 10 best episodes where you teach your best stuff can be, your 10 chapters. Like, this is what I mean about being easier than we think sometimes, because
Right.
all of you listen, even if you're just starting a business, you have an idea, you have mastery, you have expertise. And what usually happens for our authors, even when they're a couple, some people are well in, they're well into a business and they do their book and they're like, oh my God, I feel so much more masterful and empowered around my content. Like they're ready to up level because they just, something about putting it into the book. Like when you write it, you make a course, like, know your stuff a lot more than you did before. You put a framework and you put worksheets and, it's just an amazing journey, whether it's creating a course or the book. And if you have a course already, you make it your book. If you have a signature talk or you have a coaching program, that's your solution chapters.
So you're not really reinventing the wheel here then. You're just kind of taking what's been working or what has been really impactful already and just put that as the solution.
Because that's what a reader wants, right? They want to be different at the other side, whatever our topic is, right? They want to feel empowered. They want to have they want to have strategy. So I give all my best stuff in the books. I don't hold any, you know what I mean? It's like I bring it on, right? And then you want to just embed it with story. That's not a fourth S, but just think about like stories of the people you've served, but not, again, it's not like we break this book for a commercial break about, my client testimonial.
Right.
But picture this, like, Brandon, I'm just imagining, right? Like I've taken your course. So imagine that you were writing a section in your book about, slide and mouth patterns or something like that, right? Well, before teaching the actual patterns or the scripts or anything, you might say, I was working with this great guy, John, and here's what was going on for him. He just wasn't getting conversions. Like he knew he was good at his stuff, but no one was buying. And I taught him when I would teach you in this chapter, this slide mouth pattern technique. And suddenly he starts, 20% conversions and 30% and then 40, you tell a story about John, so the reader goes, oh, I'm where John is. I want to be where John is now, right?
It almost sounds like we use pillar 1 and 2 inside of pillar number 3 as well. And because that's what I do all the time anyways. Like when we do any marketing or we do our 3-day live event, anytime before or after I teach something, there's always some kind of story or example or metaphor or analogy, which again could be a story, metaphor, analogies, to either set up the desire for what I'm about to teach or to prove to the subconscious mind what I just taught makes sense and works. And so it kind of sounds like what you're doing here is when you get into the solution, it's like, tell the story. Again, give the situation that's going on that requires them to need what you're about to teach. So I absolutely love that. My question is this. Again, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here and just ask questions from the audience, which is going to be, if we do take our course and we put it into our book, what's stopping people from buying the course?
Right. This is the fascinating thing about human behavior. And this is where I'm a big neuroscience person. And so, studying this stuff and everything, people without additional support or training rarely implement. They might implement like one thing out of your whole book on their own. And that's just the truth. And that I don't say that as a reason, don't write it. It's because more people are going to hear it. They're going to say, oh, you're an industry leader. You wrote the book on it. Right. But then they're going to need to take the course, because I don't know for you, if we're a group of 2 right now, but if we had a live audience here and we said, who really loved a book, like whether it was Atomic Habits or, pick your bestseller of the week, who implemented everything in that book. If you wrote a great book on messaging, I'd probably do one thing on my own. Right. And I'm a really good student. I just would probably do one thing, but I know in order to really do this stuff, to implement, I'm going to need more accountability. I'm going to need more deep dives. And so the book is, I have clients come to me and they say, I don't even want people to finish my book. Now I do, because I love writing them and I put a lot of care and I really work my craft. But she was basically saying, she's like, look, this was a coach who has a great program. She's a 7-figure business owner. And she said, I want people to get halfway through and just hire me. That's my goal with this book. Just go, hey, I'm now convinced that what you're doing works. I tried something, I got a win, but I know to order to really go where this work is taking me, I'm going to need to either coach with you, do the course, come on your event, whatever it is. Right. And so the truth is people just won't implement on their own usually.
Yeah. Even inside your course, they won't do it sometimes. And so
why do you need to do the with the coaching, right? Right.
Yeah.
That's why we
do
more coaching.
That's the number one thing that people tell them. When I get on our sales calls for our mentorship program, The number one thing I tell them is like, we hear like, I don't want to do another course. And I go, great, because it's not another course. I said,
Yes.
this is like, you're going to get a course, like, but that's not what this is. What this is integration. We're going to integrate the philosophy of the course into your unique business, and we're going to hold you accountable, and we're going to make sure it works. Even if you took action on the entire course, it doesn't mean you're going to do it right from the beginning. And we're going to make sure that we're helping you integrate. And then that's where the program, and that's why I don't think a lot of people understand that. Like, a course isn't just about delivering education. It's about helping people implement to get the results. And
So
I think
true.
you hit the nail on the head with that. So it
It's
makes a lot
so
of sense. I
great.
love
I
that.
love this because it's true for both the book and
Yeah.
it's not about like that the book isn't super valuable because you're opening people's eyes, you're seeding why and get them a win. You know, people usually do something, a really fun strategy that we've started with our clients that want to be more high touch or they have a good sales team. You know, you got
Yeah.
people with you. So remember we talked about passive reader to relational lead, right?
Yep. Yep.
So once someone downloads that free resource or they go to the website, you know, whatever it is, they opt in. You can have, just like you do in any sales sequence, you can have someone from your team or yourself, you know, depending on if someone's newer in business, and you can reach out to every one of those people. And I had a client use this strategy and I said, let's just see what happens. She wasn't getting as many calls booked as she wanted. So I said, just everybody that opts in, just DM them and just say, you know, hey, I'm so excited, you know, that you are checking out this resource and I'd love to hear how it went. But let's be honest, a lot of times we download these things and never use them because who has time? Like she just
Right.
acknowledged like meeting them where they are. It's like,
Yeah.
you've got a lot going on. You probably haven't even had time to listen. I would love to get, you know, gift you a strategy session. And here's the link. And I'll literally walk you through the resource and make sure that you get this result out of it. And she
Mm.
just booked. And so it was just so great because then you can automate that kind of outreach. You
Yeah.
know, it is different when it's the real, you know, whatever, there's a personal touch to it, but that's the kind of, you acknowledge it. It's like, you probably aren't going to
Yeah.
implement most of the stuff in this book. It's cool. We
I
got you.
love I love that. I'm gonna steal that just so you
Yeah,
know.
do it.
Because I actually had a call with our setter this morning. His job is just to like reach out to everyone who downloads our PDF, try to set them for a call. And he's like, what do I say if someone's just like, I'm running out the door and da 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 da. And I'm just gonna use that line. Just be like, look, the reality is you're busy. We can see that clearly. You
Yeah.
probably won't even have time to get to the PDF, which means you're not going to get these results. Why don't we just give you on a free session or something like that? I'm gonna test that and see how it does. I love
Please
that.
test it, and then I
That's
want to
great.
hear how, because it really,
Yeah.
she was the first one. She was so upset on the, you know, when you're with someone, you love them and you know they're great. And I was
Yeah.
like, there's a way here. And we was like, that's what we played around. And she's like, I will never not do this for the rest of my business.
I love it. That's so good. Okay, yeah. I think you answered all my questions on that one, but I did have one more question on everything as a total because, and again, I'm just trying to use your advice for my situation, and I'm going
Yes.
like, okay, how do we find a topic? I know you kind of talked about it, but for me, it's like I always just look at my best content, and that's what we do as a webinar or a PDF or something. But when it comes to a book, do you recommend making it about the whole enchilada? Like for me, it would be all of messaging, or is it more of just like a very sub problem of messaging, like how to create effective content, or what's your advice on that?
I love this question so much because I'm going to give you an and right
Okay.
there. You could have a successful book either way.
Okay.
And I'll give everybody some examples because it's a really important question, right? Like, do you put your program in a book, you know, your
Yeah.
course in a book, or is it like, do you pull something out? So the advantage of your course or program in a book is that, you know, someone really does kind of see the pathway, especially if it's a lead generating book, which is what
Right.
we're talking about a lot here. And so there are real advantages because someone, you know, and Brand, actually, you can do your technique in it,
Hmm.
which I use all the time, which, you know, as you walk them through your solution chapters, you say, you know, you get them through step one or pillar one, you're like, this is great because you get this. But what you don't have still, you got to keep reading because what you don't have, you know, and you can use that technique,
Yeah,
right?
the one in
So
one.
there's super wonderful advantages because they get the full experience, they understand your pathway. So when you do a sales call with them, they're really familiar with the process and they're there to go like, I know I'm not going to implement this on my own, like please
Yeah.
help me, right? So great, right? Wonderful. And you could pull one or a sub piece and do a whole book, like you said, on again, I use the Dan Sullivan, if people are familiar with his stuff, because he has what he calls thinking tools, which essentially are his frameworks, right? It's like what he teaches
Hmm.
in his program, Strategic Coach. For people that aren't familiar, that's his program. And he just pulls out his thinking tools and writes a whole book on each one. because he wants to be very prolific and have lots of books. So, if he has a framework of, again, his 10X framework, he just turned into a book. But he also has a framework of who, not how, which is basically about don't try to do everything in your business. Instead of asking, how do I do this? Who is going to, do this in my business? So it's great, right? And he did a whole book on that. And no one has to be afraid about repeating your content. Like Dan's books has repeated content and reference who, not how in the 10X book and vice versa. But the point is like you could go really deep into this like a piece, like Brandon for you, one pillar, or you could do a whole book on slide them up patterns. You could do a whole book on reversals. You could, or you could do something like the top 5 messaging techniques that will scale your business, or double your business with this, or those are really terrible. I would come up with a better, if you ever do a book, I'm gonna come up and help you with a much better. Those are sucky titles. But the point being, like, you could pull out, any of you listening could pull out a component. So for example, last year I wrote, I read that women had lost $800 billion in the pandemic. That was the global hit that women took economically. And I was so upset and just wrenched about it that I took one pillar of our Thought Leader Academy, which is monetize your mission. And I turned it into a book called The Science of Getting Rich for Women, because I was playing off the old Wallace Waddles book, and we did a whole, and it was about part of the women's economic comeback. Like, here's my contribution. I can't solve it by any means. That would be ridiculous to think I could, but maybe I can, help some people have a big comeback. And it did really well, and it was really fun to write. And it's not just for women. I get pictures from the guy, and they're like, I read this, my wife had it. It was great. So it's just, it's the principles. But the point is, I took a piece of our program and did a whole book on it. This year, I actually wrote the Thought Leader Academy book that has our whole program. And because I hadn't done it yet, I've coached our clients to do it. I was like, I got to do my whole, program in the book. And now I'm going to be piecing out on the next one another of our thinking tools, another one of our frameworks. So you can do it either way. They both work. The only challenge if you do a smaller, section is you've got to dig deep and do probably some more research, some more storytelling. You're going to, just to fill the book on a smaller portion, you'll probably want to do I'm trying to think of a good example. You maybe start with a central metaphor. You think of something really cool that embodies what you're going to teach, and you write 10 pages on that. You're just going to want to make sure that you've got enough material and gravitas around that to fill your book, because you don't have to write a long book, but you want a book, especially if you're going to consider it for the lists and awards, you want to have a book 150 pages. You can do 100. We're all short attention spans now. You're going to see a lot more books coming in there instead of the 300-page book is less common now. But again, it goes fast if you're taking what you already do, master and know and live every day.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And even for us, we say very similar things. When I tell people to do tutorials and or a webinar, for example, I tell them go very granular on one small thing or problem. But I also tell them when you go smaller, you kind of need to fill up the space with some stuff. And so we use the persuasive tutorial, which is, in order to teach something, there's actually 6 steps you go through. And only one of those steps is actually the teaching part of it, where there's 5 other things you're doing to lead up to it. You're either creating demand, you're building rapport, you're getting to self-identify, you're shifting a perspective, you're telling a metaphor or story, which in my opinion, honestly makes the book even more engaging, because if you're just sitting there teaching, it's just so boring. I'm as you're going through stuff, I'm man, if I put my whole course in a book, it's going to be a big fucking book, and it's going to be such a hard read. I'm I don't think I want to do that. There's so much material in there.
I see you doing if you ever do it, it's going to be more a thought leader book, a James Clear, a Malcolm Gladwell. You're going to take a cool, this is where everybody gets to, when I say thought leader, right? It's about leading your own thoughts and then bringing a cool spin to something the 4-hour work week with Tim Ferriss. It's we all hate meetings. We freaking hate them. I hate them. I have as few as possible ever in my company. My team's probably annoyed in the fact that I have as little meetings as possible. And I love that book. I love that book for the sheer example of yes, get me out from the morass of this, meetings. And he didn't, again, solve everything for entrepreneurs, but he was here's how you're going to get yourself free. Here's a way. He took one really idea and just gave it a cool name, the 4-hour work week. And Malcolm Gladwell did that, the tipping point. Do we all know that repetition builds mastery? Yeah. But
Yeah.
was that a really fascinating read? Abs to me, it was. It was awesome.
Yeah.
We all went, oh, I got to get my reps, my 10,000 hours. Like
Right.
like Marie Kondo's, organizing your, Japanese tidying art of. It was like it's like got this crazy long title, but spark joy.
Right.
People that have heard of her. I mean, she's got the Netflix show and the book, and people made her name a verb. I'm going to condoize my closet. Like I'm
Yeah.
going to keep what spark. I mean, this is thought leader books are, which I would see for you, Brandon, anyone that doesn't want to do your whole thing in a book.
Right.
It's a great. Those are my favorite books to write. Like I'll write one book of my whole program, my whole life, and the rest are all going to be deep dives into a really fun twist on a pain point. Really, that's what you're doing in the book.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like even off the top of my head, I'm like, what could I like even just doing something like how to create effective content, like even playing off the topic that it's done really well for us of like how to create effective content without how-to tutorials or something like
Oh,
that, or something would
yes.
be, because that's been our, like from day one, that has been our number one hook. And I keep telling myself this hook is going to die at some point. Come up with something else, like just
Yeah.
have something in your back pocket because this hook's going to
Okay.
die. And then here we are 5 years later, and it's still as effective as it was 5 years ago.
It probably
So
won't because a lot of us, and I was guilty of this, just went content. We don't realize, like you said, the self-diagnosis is such a huge
mhm,
deal for people, having people reverse their limiting beliefs. No one wants to be trapped in a limiting belief. We don't
right.
know how, you're the leader, those of you writing your books, right? You're that leader, that thought leader to change their thoughts. So that's my favorite kind of book, really, is that
Yeah.
dive into a piece of it. And, for you, it's just, you give them a benefit. I think of this is just a quick thing on titles, but I think of the main title as the like the big idea, the intrigue, and then the subtitle is the promise to the reader.
That's exactly how we do webinar titles. So
Oh,
it makes
okay. I love it. So
perfect.
same thing, right? So it's like what's that big, like messaging for scale, whatever, like the big thing that they get, that big benefit they get out of messaging of, what, and it's that, I think yours is the content circle of death, right? It's just
Yeah.
like
Yep.
getting out of that. I mean, this is a book right here. They don't need all the other pieces. And
Right.
the advantage to that model is, they know there's more in the course than your work that they didn't get
Right.
in the book. So
Yeah.
they, when they get on that call, they're like, oh, that already gave me so much. I want the other pillars.
I love it. I mean, I feel like this is our messaging philosophy in the form of a book, which
Yeah.
I love because there's so many similarities between your process of what you do and how we teach messaging. And so it makes a ton of sense. Now, my last question to you is just around the monetized side of this thing. Are we
Yes.
just running them into just a standard funnel? Is it like they opt in and then it's just a funnel you already have set up with an email sequence? Is there any right, wrongs,
Yeah.
what ways to do it?
So I mean, I find this so fun. Like when I do book funnels with our clients, I like pull out fun in funnels because I used to do the word funnel and be like, oh God,
Right.
oh, so hard. Funnels, it's so intimidating. And right, it's just a pathway, right? It says,
Hmm.
it's just a pathway. So there's a couple things at the, you could put the book as the front of a funnel very easily, right? You go out and guest speak and people know you're an author. You can run ads to a book. There's all these things you can do to become visible, go in the media, be a topic expert. Just something for everyone to know. So authors, experts with a book, get chosen 80% more for the media, podcasts, and conference speaking
Interesting.
than people without a book. So for anyone
Yeah.
that kind of wants those as part of your marketing mix and your lead generation, it's just one of those like, oh, and especially we're committed that all our clients are best-selling authors as well as just authors. So it really is great for that kind of thing. So you can use the book at the front end of a funnel. And again, your strategies there are, you run ads to it, or you go out and speak, or you go on someone's you just,
Right.
podcast tours are great. People buy a lot of books off podcasts, which is
Oh,
really
interesting.
interesting. I like pull over on the side of the road. Oh, Amazon, like I buy a lot of books off podcasts. And so anyway, there's all these ways you can do a podcast tour. You can do all kinds of things. You can also have your book as like, this is so old school, but I'm really interested in experimenting with this over the next 12 months. I know some people doing 7 figures a year off the strategy. So they will like research people on LinkedIn or, on different social platforms, and it needs to be somewhere you can find the person's mailing address. They actually like old school direct mail. You like send the person a book and a note about, again, Brandon, might be like, you send it to them like, hey, I know that, I love your stuff on LinkedIn. Like, do you have a course, or do you have, like you basically, and not in like a smarmy, but just like, hey, I see you. And I
Yeah.
think there's more for you. I think there's next level, and you're someone who I want to take to that next level. And here's my book, and there's like, it breaks through some of the online stuff that we have. And there's
Yeah.
someone I know doing 7 figures a year off just this strategy. Like,
That's crazy.
it's
It
wild.
reminds me of this strategy that Matt, my director of growth, told me about. He used to run his own agency back in the day.
Yeah.
And what they used to do is they do exactly what you're talking about. It's like research these people they think would be a great fit, someone they can actually help. They would actually send them an iPad. So they would send them an iPad that they get to keep. So it's like a $400
Whoa.
thing. So it's a pretty
Right.
big loss leader, but they would have a video message on it. So when they turn it on, it's like a
Mm,
video message and it's like,
that's
hey,
hot.
so and so. And they built $1 million agency pretty quickly with that strategy.
That
It's,
is, I'm going to take time to process that one after because it's
yeah,
amazing, right? But that's also like, think about, so few people get something through the mail that's fun. Like
right.
we got like metallic mailers and did it all, really cool. But yeah, I mean, in terms of how are you marketing this thing? I mean, the thing is the book, because you'll get picked more as a topic expert in the media, speaking, podcasts, there's your sort of way to get more visibility on the
Hmm.
front. And here's the book, and the book has those lead generation devices built in, so you're moving people again from reader to lead through the book. But there's lots of ways you can partner with organizations and do events. So we have an author right now who is she reached out to organizations that are kind of interested in the topic of her book, and she's on like doing 4 events where they're buying their whole company, the book. They're buying the whole company, like it's 500 books, and then she goes and gives a talk and kind of, whatever. And so
Yeah,
you can do really cool like bulk volume
that's
buys, which I
cool.
really love. You can of course run, just a straight up funnel with ads, right?
Right.
Ads to the book. The book has the lead generation options built in. You can do it that way. We have another author who she was like, I'm so tired of doing events. Like I actually love doing it. We do 2 in-person events every year and we do our stuff,
Yeah.
but she was just over it. She'd been doing it for a long time. And so she's like, I just want the book to be like our marketing strategy. So she just really had that strategy I shared earlier where she did a self liquidation campaign, if anyone's heard of that. So it's basically
Yeah.
like if you pay for postage, we'll ship you the
Right.
book.
Yeah.
And the book had, signed from her, and then it really like profiled that assessment. She did the assessment as her resource. And then her team just reached out to every single person that downloaded that assessment, her setter, and they moved to,
Yeah.
I mean, she did over $3 million a year,
Wow.
you know,
I think
and just, she
it's
just
time for me to
wanted the
write a
book.
book.
If she just,
Yeah.
well, right? She was like, I don't want to be hands on. She wanted to leverage her. She wanted more freedom. She wanted to not
Yeah.
work as much.
Yeah.
And she didn't want, the events are a lot, right? So she just got out of that model and she's like, I just think the book can do it. And she did, again, she did it strategically to be a lead
Right.
generator, and it's done so well for her. So it's, yeah, I mean, I think the monetizing comes when we each pick a strategy that suits our personality, right? Like some
Right.
people are going to love that assessment to outreach from team. Other people are going to really want to do the speaking thing. They just really love, going virtually or in person and doing the speaking route. And other people love to go, be on NBC and do, you got to go where your people are though. See
Right.
the media stuff. I'm always like, I have our clients really assess, like we have a discernment process because it can sound exciting. I'm going to be on NBC, but like my people aren't watching the news. Like at
Right.
least, my like people are on Instagram or,
Right.
they're like that's not where they're hanging out. So just want to be aware of it's great to get that. Those logos are wonderful. It can be worth it to just kind
Right.
of put the logos on your stuff, but I really like looking for the other great thing is guest blogging or guest article writing. Like we get our clients into Forbes or entrepreneur places, and the author of the Brandon Lucera's upcoming book, this, and you get to put your opt-in in the byline, like
Oh,
instead of
that's
the
awesome.
website of the book, and it's just freaking great. Like there's people that enroll themselves. I've put it in the
Yeah.
bio, and someone calls up and just says, "How do I join?" Like that's the sales call. It's
Yeah.
like, you know,
I mean, the thing I think I like the most about it is that there's so many options for so many different things of what you need it for. For me, I'm like just looking at it from just more of like a lead generation sort of thing. Just like for my first book, I wouldn't want, if it happens, great. I'm not going to be mad about it or whatever, but my intention would not be to get on the top of these best-selling lists, like New York Times or whatever. But it would be more of like, how many leads can we generate and how much bigger can we make our audience because of it? And then the other thing too is what I correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I would imagine too, is even if it's designed for leads, you're going to be getting leads, but the brand awareness that comes from that is probably huge too. So for us, for example, anytime we do a big launch, it's like lead generation, lead generation, lead generation. But what I tell people is we also see massive spikes in podcast downloads. And it's just this beautiful byproduct because of brand awareness. And it spikes and comes down a little bit, but then it maintains for most of it. And that's how we've basically grown our podcast over the years, is just through our launches. I would imagine the book is probably having the same effect, right?
It sure does. And what's so interesting is books, for as many books as are out there, right? A book still holds this credibility piece in our society. Like, people view it like they would a certain degree, or, you wrote the book on it, you are an expert. Like, it's a subconscious, back to, you talk a lot about the subconscious mind, and subconsciously someone says, like, you must be an expert in this, you must be an industry leader, like, you wrote the book on it, especially if you like a proper good professional book, like we're talking about. And people are like, wow. And it checks a box. Like, if you're looking at 2 coaches or 2 courses and someone's got a best-selling book on the topic, and the other person, I do this game with people on our webinars. I say, all right, you're hiring someone for this. And I take them to the page of the person who is just a wonderful coach on the topic, right? And they take them to the page with the person with the best-selling book and the logos and everything. And it's like, who are you hiring?
Yeah.
And so there totally is a spike in visibility, a spike in credibility. Yeah. And that's why, again, I'm committed to people, just, get on the Amazon bestseller list so you're a best-selling author. Like, that's a credential in our world.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Sarah, I appreciate you so much. I think you have inspired me to write a book. It's been on the back of my mind. And it's like I said in the beginning, it's been this daunting sort of thing of like, I don't know if I have the time, the bandwidth for it, because I had the story. I'm a very slow writer. But as we went through it today, I'm like, I could bang this out in 8 weeks, no problem. Like, that doesn't seem like a very difficult task to do, especially with the framework that you have. So I really appreciate you coming on, sharing this with the audience. If people wanted to learn more about you, work with you, where can they go?
Absolutely. So, our Instagram, I'm just at Sara Connell, and I'm SaraConnell. So it's Sarah without an H, on Instagram. And then I know we've got some free gifts for your audience if they're interested. Can share more about that. But Instagram's great. You can DM us, and our website also is saraconnell.com. So
cool.
Very easy.
Yeah. And what gifts do you have for them?
Yeah. So we have because it feels so overwhelming, Brandon, to your point of how do you put a book together, and the SSS is at the core. But there are a couple of great exercises to your point of like, how do I even pick the big idea? And I have a Venn diagram of like what makes a bestseller before you start. So essentially, I would love to share with anyone that wants it are 7 steps to writing a revenue generating best-selling book. And that is just an instant download. It's completely free as our gift to you. And you'll get the workbook, and it's like a step-by-step guide. So you can go a little deeper in what we did today. And especially if some of you understand, like, okay, I kind of have an idea, but again, do I want to do my program? Do I want to do a piece of my, this will help walk you through all the way up through what's that interactive resource that I want to put in there to generate leads. So it's it's like a little roadmap, and just kind of get you through to take the pressure off. Like you said, this can be so much easier than we think. Like I said, 99% of our clients have never written before. They're not writers. They didn't feel like they were good in English class. They and a lot of them don't have a big social media following, and they use the book as the way to blow it up.
I love it. So they can grab that at your website?
I have the link that I shared with your team, so maybe we can put that along with the episode, because you can get it at the website.
We'll put it on the show notes. You guys can go to the website as well. So go check that out. Again, Sarah, thank you so much for everything that you dropped today. It really did open up my eyes to a book. Again, like I said, it's this big daunting thing where now I'm at the point where I'm like, it's not even a nice to have. It's like, okay, we need to absolutely do this.
Yes.
So I appreciate you coming on today and sharing that with us. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Awesome. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, let me know by heading over to iTunes and leaving us a review. I love reading all of the reviews. It keeps me going. The more reviews we have, the more exposure we have. The more exposure we have, the more I can do for you. So head over there, leave us a review, and I'll see you all on the next episode. Take care. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested. And thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.